Welcome to the Life You Love podcast.
We're your hosts, Grace Lemire
and Erin Convertini.
This podcast is for the dreamers and the doers.
For the women who want to create a life they genuinely love waking up to.
We believe that life's short, so let's build one we love.
When someone asks you, what do you like to do you feel like you don't have a great answer? Hobbies are such an important topic for young adults, and the importance of them is super underrated. They say happiness is gauged by how much time you spend in the present versus the past or the future, and hobbies truly are the one thing that keep you present and still. I personally feel like I've been so obsessed with my career in my 20s that I've neglected developing hobbies. So if you're looking for some new inspiration or you want to know why it's important in the first place, this episode is for you.
I am so excited for this episode. This is actually an idea that one of y'all, I think, left in Spotify or DM'd us or left on an Instagram story sticker. And I was so happy to see that topic because I am in a stage of my life where I'm really investing more time and energy and money into my hobbies because this might sound vain, but I saw something last year that said something along the lines of like, I want to be the cool girl in the sense that when people ask me, what do you like to do? I'm not like, oh, like, I don't really have anything. Like, I want to be the person who's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I love to do this and this and this. And I think it was a video maybe that I saw about this, but the person was also saying, think about when you go on a date with someone and you're like, oh, so what do you like to do? And they're so interesting. And they're like, oh yeah, I like to surf and I like to volunteer and I like to do all these things. And you're like, wow, you're so interesting. And I have so many things to ask you about. I realized at one point, I think it was last year or the year before, I was like, I don't have an answer. Like you said, being so focused on your career, that was really all I had. I didn't have any sort of cool things I liked to do. And I was like, dang, I'm not very interesting. I was like, I don't really have much to say. And so I'm in this season of being more interesting, having more things to do and giving myself fun ways to spend my time outside of work. And it's been so fun. So I love this topic.
No, I love that so much. I feel like that's me currently, feeling like I have no good answer for this question. I was just in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago for work, and my boss asked me, he was like, yeah, like what do you spend your free time with? What do you like to do for fun? And I was like, honestly, this is the worst question. Like, I don't know. I literally don't know. And it's not that I just feel like the hours in the day go by so fast between like I exercise, I spend a lot of time walking my dog. And I feel like those types of like random miscellaneous life things typically are the answers that we give for hobbies. But the purpose of this conversation and the purpose of hobbies in general is to, one, find things that you're just like inherently curious about and spending time on them. But then two, spending time like completely focused on the thing that you're doing. And that's why like exercise maybe can't be considered your hobby, or like taking your dog on a walk can't be necessarily considered your hobby. It's because when you're doing those things, you're probably thinking about something else. Like if I'm taking Bella on a walk, I'm not sitting there like so focused on this walk. I'm focused on like what I have to do later or what I did that day at work. So the purpose of hobbies is, like I said in the intro, you're spending more time in the present and just really focus on the thing that you're doing because you really enjoy it and you're really curious about it, as opposed to spending time in the past or the future. The other thing with that is like when people say that hanging out with their friends or going to dinner with their friends is their hobby, that's also why that can't necessarily be considered a hobby. Because if you think about it, when you go grab a drink with your friends, what are you doing? You're sitting there and you're talking about either the past or the future. You're not spending time in the present because you're not presently doing anything. You're just talking. So this episode and just hobbies in general, it's really all just about finding something that's going to keep you in that present moment.
I think the curiosity piece that you mentioned is also such an important part of this because I think a lot about how when we're kids, if we're curious about something, we're really apt to express that curiosity and then find ways to fill it. Like even down to just little things. I've mentioned before on the podcast, I used to be a preschool teaching assistant. And a lot of times when kids are like, quote unquote, acting out, it's just because they're curious about something. So like they spill a little bit of their water and internally they're just curious what would happen if they spill the whole thing. And that's why kids will spill the whole thing right after. And you're like, you'll look at them and be like, why'd you just do that? You spilled a little water and made a mess. And then you thought, let me spill the whole thing. But it's because they're curious about what would happen. Or if they have something and they throw it, it's usually because they're curious what would happen if they do it. And they just don't know natural consequences yet. They're learning that as part of life. But even down to kids' interests, like I used to think about how many kids would express an interest in something and their parents would buy them a toy to let them explore that interest, or they're really interested in Spider-Man at the time and they come in the next day and they've got a Spider-Man costume on or whatever, and how normal it is to basically express your curiosity as a child and invest in it and discover it. And then I think when we get older, we have a lot of curiosities around certain things that we just never act on. And I think finances becomes a big part of that. I know for me, it has been like I've felt guilt around spending more on my hobbies, but I think it's important as an adult to explore your curiosities outside of work. And even if something doesn't become a full fledged hobby, it's just something that you're like, I'm really curious about what this would be like. And so you try it. I've mentioned before in here that when I was in California for a month and a half, my friend and I did flying trapeze classes at a circus school. Did flying trapeze become like a major hobby for me? No, but I was really curious about it. And I was like, I want to try that. And I think if I was living in LA, I probably would. It probably would be a hobby of mine because it was so fun, but I wanted to fill that curiosity. And so I did. And I think that's how we find a lot of cool hobbies that we have, is by just not letting our curiosities just sit still, just being like, yeah, I'm curious about it and I'm just going to go give it a shot.
Yeah, and I think that's also the big misconception with hobbies is that you need to commit to something being a consistent hobby. But I think a lot of times, and like at the end, towards the end of this episode, we are going to give a big list of kind of like different things that you could try to spark some inspiration. But I think the big theme here is that not everything has to be a consistent hobby that you do all the time. Like, for example, I love the Instagram videos where people are flipping furniture, and not even to resell, but just like because that's like their creative hobby is they love to like buy an old dresser at Goodwill and then make it beautiful. And realistically, if you want to go try that, you don't need a million dressers. Like you need one dresser for your house. So like you might do that once and that's okay. It doesn't mean that like that's not considered a hobby because you're not a consistent furniture flipper. You can try it once and it could be fun and you could be curious about it and it could go good or it could go bad, but you are allowed to kind of explore things that might not be like you're doing it on a consistent basis. I remember a couple of weeks ago or about a month ago, I was in Nashville and I was staying with my friend and the topic of hobbies came up and she went into her spare bedroom and she brought out this huge box. She called it her hobby box and she had like all of these things in there for all of these different hobbies that she tried. And she's really crafty. So she's tried like every single crafty hobby, like knitting and crocheting and making friendship bracelets, like all of these things. And she kind of laughed about it and was like, I've spent so much money on the things in these hobby boxes and then everything becomes like half of a project. So I feel like that can be like what people say about it too, is like, I don't want to buy all of these things, not go through with it, not make it a consistent hobby. And then I have all of these things lying around. So I think that's something to keep in mind too. It's like, one, it's fine. It's not that deep. If you go buy stuff to go make friendship bracelets and then you make one and you never do it again, like, okay, whatever, maybe sell the supplies on Facebook Marketplace. But it's also kind of like a, maybe choose a hobby that you don't need to invest hundreds of dollars into all of these supplies just to get started.
I think that speaks too to like the purpose of a hobby and why hobbies matter to begin with, because the point is to do something out of enjoyment, to do it because you're like, I just enjoy this. You know, there doesn't have to be a greater purpose. It doesn't always have to bring you an ROI. I think that's where I always would struggle too with spending money on hobbies because, for example, I used to love to bake and I would bake pretty often. And I would bake a lot. This was like back in high school. I'd bake a lot for my brother and like his friends or when he was in student council. And I was baking for somebody. But now when I'm just by myself, I'm like, well, I don't really want to go spend $20 on ingredients and then just bake. And then, I mean, I'll eat it all week, right? But like some of these recipes, I found a girl, did follow her on social media because her recipes look amazing, but it was like approachable recipes was like her thing. And it was like, they were like 12 to 15 step donuts. I was like, this is unapproachable, guys. And the amount of ingredients, especially being gluten free, don't even get me started on how much a bag of almond flour costs. Okay. It's going to be like $30 to $40 in ingredients. And then you make something and you eat it for a week. And then it's like, okay, but
Yeah,
the
you can only eat so much.
right? I can only eat so many pumpkin
Yeah.
donuts as one girl, you know? But I got in this headspace where I was like, well, I don't want to spend all the money on it, da, da, da. But the point is to do things you enjoy just because you enjoy them. And like, it doesn't have to be something that brings you an ROI, right? Like if you enjoy refinishing furniture, it doesn't have to be something that brings you money. That's a side hustle, you know? And if you want to turn your hobby into a jobby, as they say, you can do that. You can say, okay, like I really love to crochet. I'm going to sell the stuff that I crochet, but it can just be a hobby for fun. My mom is a great example of that. She crochets and she crochets like the cutest, coolest things. She used to make these little baby Yodas that were little crochet stuffies. They were so cute and everyone was so obsessed with them. My mom was making little crocheted baby Yodas for everybody. Just like I would have an acquaintance be like, oh, that was so cute. My mom's like, what's their address? I'm sending them one right now. Like it was so cute. But I used to say to her all the time, why not start an Etsy and sell them on there? And she was like, because it's a hobby, like it's meant to be fun. And if I turn it into a business, then it's going to be something that now I'm doing it on a schedule that maybe I don't enjoy. And the purpose is to have it be for enjoyment. And so I think like outside, if we have our jobs where we're exchanging our time for money, we need to have things outside of work where we're just doing things purely for enjoyment.
Yeah, I agree. The topic of hobbies versus side hustles is so interesting, and I think people have strong opinions on it. And I feel like I kind of lean somewhere in the middle. I agree with you on if you're going to turn one of your hobbies into a side hustle, maybe have a hobby that you strictly like are not going to
Mm-hmm.
monetize. If that's your only thing, then I think you get into the situation where it stops becoming fun, it starts feeling like work, and then you're back to square one where you don't have any hobbies. I think that's where I was in. When I was in college, I got into a lot of like investing research, I would call it, as a hobby. Like I was very inherently curious about money and investing and real estate and all of that. And learning about that became my hobby. I loved reading like investing books. I loved reading real estate investing books, even though I was not in a phase of life where I was trying to buy a real estate property at all. Like that wasn't the purpose of it. I was just very inherently curious about the stock market and money. So that became my hobby. But then I started posting on social media about it. And all of a sudden I started making money from that, which is amazing. But that what isn't considered my hobby anymore because I do it for work. So I think it's important to kind of like have something that you do strictly out of enjoyment, but it's also fine if you do have a hobby that you want to turn into a side hustle. I also think if there's something that's maybe like on this creativity list when it comes to hobbies, that you're like, oh, that could be a fun business idea. I think it has to start with being a hobby. For example, my friend, she's very crafty when it comes to like sewing. And she used to have an Etsy shop in college where she would make like sporting apparel. I don't know if you've seen any Instagram
Mm-hmm.
reels
Yeah.
about that where people make like really cool designs for sporting events. And she had the Etsy shop in college. But before that, she spent years just like sewing on her own because she loved it. And I feel like that's the best way to kind of transition that hobby into side hustle because you're already naturally doing it on your own for fun. And you know, you've like given yourself proof that you can do it strictly for fun for a while without making any money off of it.
I completely agree. I think if you turn everything that you like doing for fun into a job, then it's like, what do you have left? But I also think that, yeah, if you can find a way to monetize a passion that you have, that's amazing too. I think one of the other things with hobbies that we were talking about, like not necessarily getting an ROI from your hobby and whatever, I think one of the other things that deters people from hobbies or makes them not want to prioritize it, which I totally feel this, is the desire to feel like you have to be productive 24/7. And I think it's funny because I I think when I first, I mean, when I was in college, even when I was in high school, I'm like, dang, this goes way back as I'm saying this out loud. I've always been the like, I don't want to say overachiever because I think that has kind of like a negative connotation, but I've always been extremely driven. I've always been in multiple clubs and extracurriculars when I was in high school. Same thing when I was in college. I had multiple jobs in college. I graduated college and started my business, was working 70 hours a week. Like hobbies was like the last thing I was thinking about. Everything I was doing was like moving me forward in a very intentional and specific way. Every job, every extracurricular, every moment I was spending on my business, everything. And so the idea of having a hobby was like a waste of time to me. I was like, no, I need to use every hour to be productive. And I think that all served a purpose for the phase of life I was in. But then when I had like my first round of burnout, I remember being like, okay, well, I probably should spend more time on hobbies. And I didn't really have any, I didn't have any. I didn't have a hobby that I enjoyed. And I remember I started to journal and read every night before bed. And reading has become such a big hobby for me. It's been like over 2 years where I've read every single day. And it was at first, that was funny. I was reading only self help books or business books. And I remember seeing a video of a therapist on social media who said something along the lines of, she's like, I'll ask my clients, oh, do you like to read? And they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, what do you read? And they'll say, self help books. And she goes, that's not like relaxation. She said,
It's
because
not
you're
enjoying.
learning. No, she's like, that's not. She said, that is a skill building activity. She's like, I want to see an activity that is like relaxes your brain. And some people, reading self-help is relaxing if it's serving a different purpose. But like when you're in the mindset of, oh, I'm trying to grow, whether it's in your business or personal, and you're reading a self-help book, you're really trying to absorb and process what you're reading. As where if I'm out here reading a Colleen Hoover or a murder mystery book, like I'm not, granted, I'm like, who murdered who? You know, I'm like, I want to know, like I'm in it that way, but I'm not in it in the sense of like the next day I'm trying to implement what I just read. Surely not if I'm reading a murder mystery, my goodness. Or like when I'm reading a self-help book, I'm thinking about, okay, like, or a business book, how can I implement this in my business? That's not relaxing. And so I think that we have to remember that rest is productive and having hobbies is productive. Productive does not mean that you are getting an ROI, or productive is like, the way I look at it is like it's contributing to the life that I want to have. Like, is it productive for my business? No. Honestly, yes, taking, resting is productive for my output at work, but is it productive for my rest? Is it productive for my energy? Is it like I need to be having things outside of work that stimulate my brain in a different way or relax my brain? Because that's important for my health as a whole being, not just as a worker.
Yeah, this productivity trap, I feel like I've been in that in my 20s. And this is probably the first year where I've really acknowledged that and have tried to get out of it. But I would do the exact same thing. I would feel like I want to be productive 24/7, but I would be on one extreme or the other. I would either be trying to be super productive, but then to balance that out, I would think that I would need to go like rot on the couch for 2 hours and literally turn my brain off and just like turn the TV on and not focus at all. Like, you know what I mean? It was kind of one or the other. And I was trying to balance that like hyper productivity with literally just rotting on the couch. And there has to be an in between. I also think there's so much to be said for giving yourself something to look forward to at the end of the day and structuring your day with that in mind. And maybe this only really applies as much if you are self-employed and your kind of like work hours are a little bit less defined. But I know for me, for example, if I know I'm going to go like play tennis with a friend at 5 o'clock, right? All of a sudden I'm on like more of a timeline to get all of my things done in the morning to give my, or let's say I'm going to play tennis with my friend at 3 o'clock because that's the time that she has available, right? I'm going to like get all of my things done earlier so that I can have my afternoon available. But if every single night of the week I have no plans and I am just going to like rot on the couch, then all of a sudden I'm like, well, I have all day to like get to what I need to do. Like I could do all of my work related things at any hour because I have nothing going on. It does give you a little bit more structure. So just remembering that as well. I also think on the reading topic, because this is a typical one as well, where people say like reading is their hobby, which is an amazing hobby. Reading, think, and like in my opinion, it doesn't only have to be for enjoyment to make it a hobby. It can also be for that curiosity piece. But the distinguishing part that makes it a hobby instead of like doing it for your personal development is like what's the underlying intention behind you reading. Obviously, if you're reading like a Colleen Hoover book, it is for like relaxation and just enjoyment, but it can also be more so on the curiosity side where you're reading, let's say, like a biography about someone or like a history book or just something that you're inherently curious about to like learn in a new kind of like sphere that you're not trying to again monetize. That can also classify it as a hobby as well.
100%. And if you are reading self-help books, like let's say that's what you really, really enjoy. And like, I know I like reading self-help books for the psychology piece. Like, I want to understand different aspects of psychology because that's just a personal interest that I have. So, for example, I just started reading the Let Them Theory book, and I don't necessarily think that's going to like change my world because I used to care a lot about what other people did and thought about me and whatever. And now I really don't. So I think that this book, I probably could have used it a few years ago. So I don't think it's going to necessarily change my life now. But I know that there's probably going to be a lot of learnings about psychology that I will find really fascinating and that will probably help me create better content or interact with my friends better or whatever. Like, I just find it fascinating. But if you are reading self-help all the time, it's okay. Like, it still means that reading is a hobby for you. It's just like, how are you actually using that hobby for something other than, like, don't stay in the mindset of, oh, my hobbies have to produce something for me or make me money or make me a better person or what, like, you know what I mean? Like, it can be something that you just enjoy, like, just because. Like, you know what I mean? You can be like, I really love running and I don't really care about it for the physical benefit. I like that it lets me zone out, like, and clear my head. Or I like to go for runs at the beach and I like seeing the sunrise. I hate the running, but I like seeing the sunrise. That's fine too. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It's to help with your mental health, I think, in a
Yeah,
lot of
no, that's a
ways.
really good distinction because, like, for example, I am an entrepreneur, but me reading an entrepreneurship book can and can't be considered a hobby, right? Depending on how I go about it. Like, if I pick up an entrepreneurship book, for example, I've read The Lean Startup because I work with a startup. That book was not my hobby. I was doing it to like get very tactical like examples of how I could apply that to my job. But I've also read a book, for example, I love the book The Originals, and it's an entrepreneurship book. It talks a lot about like founders and stuff, but I read that book strictly because I was interested in like business and the founder space, and I took nothing from it that I applied to what I'm doing today, but I was just strictly curious and interested. That can be considered a hobby as well. So again, it's just about like really going into it with the right intentions and doing it for the purpose of enjoyment, curiosity. But with that, the next piece of this, we're going to talk about like some specific hobbies that you can try. I feel like this is good for some inspiration because if you're like me and you don't have a good answer for what do you like to do for fun, it can be overwhelming because one, there's like a lot, but then there's also, if you try to think of something off the top of your head, it kind of seems like there's nothing to do.
Mhm.
Like I know a lot of people feel like that. It's like, oh, there's nothing to do. Like, what would I do? Or as we're heading into winter, if you live in a place where the weather kind of sucks in the winter, you might be feeling like, oh, that limits me so much. Like, what am I going to do in the winter? So we want to kind of talk about this. We broke this out by 3 types of hobbies. So we said creative, movement, and brain stimulating hobbies. We're going to give you guys a bunch of examples of some different ones that you can try.
In the creativity category, so when we in our notes, Erin wrote this and I'm going to read it, but she said, stop saying you're not creative enough to have a creative hobby. And I love that because I think that people think of creativity as like, well, I'm an artist or something, or I'm like, I have to be really good. Like, I'm not going to um, draw or color or paint or whatever if I'm not good at that. It's again, the point is not to be necessarily, like, not every hobby has to be something that you want to be amazing at. Like, you can be mediocre at something and it can still be a hobby that you enjoy. Like, if I tried to paint or draw, I could paint like okay, but if I tried to draw, Lord help me, it would look horrendous. I can't draw. But I used to actually love coloring. And same even with coloring, I wasn't even that like great at it, like, you know, choosing colors that complement each other and like blending the colors, whatever. I wasn't that great at it, but it's fun and it's supposed to stimulate like a different part of your brain as well, which is really important, especially if you're always using like your logical brain at work and stuff. It's good to do something that stimulates your creative brain.
100%. And I think the creativity piece is a really good example of how you can have a hobby that doesn't have to be a consistent hobby. You can do it one time. For example, in January, I hosted my friends over and we did like a vision board night. And I went and I bought like cheap frames at Hobby Lobby and we each like printed out a bunch of photos from our vision board. And I got like glue and scissors and they came over and we spent 2 hours like making physical vision boards. Is vision board making my hobby all the time? No, I'm not going to do that like once a week or once a month, but it was so fun. And it's like being creative can be your hobby in general, and you can have different mediums for that if you don't want to do something over and over again. Other examples of this are you see like the wine glass painting. You can have your friends over or you can do it by yourself and you can like paint wine glasses. But then once you have painted wine glasses, you're not going to go paint more wine glasses. But you see what I mean? You can do a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be something that you do all the time, but just being creative can be considered your hobby.
Hmm. I added on this list too diamond painting. If you've been here for a minute, you know, last year I did diamond painting so much. That was like one of my little hobbies. It's basically, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's like a this sticky, it's almost like a paint by number, but you stick little gems onto the little squares where there are with the corresponding letter or number, and it will eventually form like a big picture. And it really doesn't take any creative talent because you're literally just being like, okay, this square says A, let me go pick up the gem that corresponds with A, and then we stick the gem down. But it is like a creative thing because you're like kind of using your hands in the same way that you would if you're like painting and stuff. I also think that, which I really want to try this, I really want to get into it. I just feel like it would be costly, but I really want to get into like cookie and cake decorating. And like if I just like making some sugar cookies, it can even be place and bake sugar cookies if I can find some like gluten-free ones or whatever, and then learning how to decorate the top of them. I think it would be so fun. I also really want to get into cake decorating. Again, I just think it would be so fun. I just am like, what am I gonna do with a cake? Like after I make it, maybe I could try to make a mini one or something. I don't know. But same thing. It's like that's creative and fun. You don't have to be great at it. It's still gonna taste like cake. It's still gonna taste like a cookie at the end, and it's gonna be good. And it's just fun. One that you reminded me of when you were talking about the wine glasses too is I've never seen people do those candle nights where everyone gets like a white or like plain candle, and then you melt like wax of different colors and you can kind of like paint with it almost, and you make little candles. I think that would be so fun, especially as like a girls' night too, and just a good creative thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good, if this is something where you're like, no, I totally want to get into some more creative hobbies, like challenge yourself to maybe it's even you start with once a month. Like once a month, I am going to try to paint a wine glass, or we're coming up on Christmas. I've seen a lot of people DIYing their own Christmas ornaments, which you can get them at the dollar store. It doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
expensive. And then you can buy paint for super cheap too. Like a lot of these actually aren't as expensive as you might think, but maybe challenge yourself to do something once a month even. I feel like that like can bring so much fulfillment into your life. The cake decorating one too does not have to be expensive at all. My niece actually got into this as a hobby. She's like 14 and she got so good at it. And then it got to the point where people started asking her to do like graduation party cakes.
Mm-hmm.
And she liked it for a while and now she's like over it. But that's okay too. Like you can have a hobby for 6 months and then you can get over it and it's totally fine. The one that I want to start doing, since now I'm moving into my house and my house has a garage, and most of the time when you're in an apartment, you don't have a lot of space. But I want to get into a lot more like larger DIY projects. Like, for example, have you seen the people have like the big canvases and kind of what's the material? It's not caulking, but it's like the white stuff, and you get the brush and you
I
kind
know
of,
I did it in my when you make the canvas.
yeah, like
I
the
did it in
can.
my last apartment. Yeah, what is
Okay.
that called? I know
Yeah,
what
I
you're
don't
talking
know.
about though.
You guys
Yeah.
might have no idea what we're talking about, but it
No, I
becomes
know
like
what
a
it is. Yeah.
textured like
Yeah.
painting for your wall. And it's like stuff like that. Like, obviously, that's not going to be a consistent hobby. I only need one of them for my wall, but I could do that. Or maybe I can flip like a nightstand that I find from Goodwill and just like little things here and there. But I feel like there's so many things that you can get creative about and just try things here and there.
Also, too, this reminds me last year, or no, 2 years ago, because I was living at my parents' house, I wanted to try embroidery. First of all, that is so much harder than it looks like, and you need so much patience. But I bought like something, I think it was at a thrift store. I'm trying to remember what exactly it was. And then I tried to embroider like, or maybe this is called hand stitching. I don't know what the technical term is, but my mom has a bunch of embroidery like thread, and I hand stitched like a cursive like word into it. Yeah, it took me forever, and my like stitches were all like uneven and stuff. But then that's one where if you don't like how it looks, you just cut the thread and you take it out. Like, but I would love to get into buying things at thrift stores and then turning it into something cool, like buying a denim jacket and then buying like patches and sewing patches on, or buying a pair of jeans and then sewing little like hearts onto the jeans or something. I don't know, something cute. I think, no, it's just fun. I like the process too of hobbies, like the process of baking, the process of putting a puzzle together, the process of, sewing something. I think it's so cool to like watch something come together. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
the
that's nerdy.
clothing piece I would probably be terrible at, but my friends and I talked about doing this for the Steelers season,
Mm.
like each bringing a piece, maybe it be like a denim jacket or a shirt or a pair of jeans or whatever you want, and then us all kind of like doing it together and trying to make something cool. And my friend knows how to work a sewing machine, so if we like absolutely need it, like we could call in some reinforcements. But the other one that I tried, the last one on the creativity piece, the one that I tried back in high school was crocheting. My nunny used to crochet all the time. I have like a couple crocheted blankets from her. So I was like, I'm going to pick up crocheting. And I did it for so long. I think it was like months, and I had a fourth of a blanket done. And I was like, okay, I give up. I can't do this anymore.
It is hard.
It
Like
takes
I
so
said,
long.
my mom will crochet things and she's really good at it. But even then, like she'll crochet day in and day out. She made a blanket for my cousin. I think my mom listens to this podcast sometimes. So if you're listening, hey girl. But she crocheted a blanket for my little cousin, and bless her, it was a Minecraft blanket. So you know how Minecraft is like little boxes, right? So she made the blanket like Minecraft. So she made like, it must have been like 100 squares, like individual
Gosh.
squares, so that it looked like the blanket was made like in Minecraft, basically. Then she had to stitch together every single square. And he was like, what, like 9, I think at the time, 7. It was like a king size blanket. The blanket was huge because she wanted to make him something he could grow into. The blanket took so long, and she was working on it again, like day in and day out. Like, she's committed to it because she loves it. She made my brother a blanket for his house. I think it took her like almost like a year. Um, Sorry to expose you on here, girl, but same thing. She was like day in and day out. Like, depending on what you crochet, it can take a significant amount of time, and depending on how much time you have to invest. So there is actually, I really want to try. There's a company. This is going to sound crazy if this is not its name, but I think it's called Woobles or something. Please, if you're listening to this and you're like, I know the company, please like leave it in Spotify. I think it's Woobles, but they create these little like crochet kits basically, where they send you, you make these little like stuffies. And I mean, I think they have a bunch of different ones, but you can make little stuffies of like a stuffed shark or whatever. And they send you just as much as you need. And they're meant to be like shorter projects. I think I might try something like that, because the idea of having to go out and like pick the right yarn and put everything, that sounds like a little
Overwhelming.
much right now. But I think a little Wooble kit where I make like, yeah, stuffed shark would be really cute. Also, nothing too crazy, and a good way to test out the hobby. I think the kits are like $50, so they are a little bit pricey, but it makes it a lot easier for you, and a good way to test out a hobby before you like full on, before you're at Hobby Lobby picking out a bunch of yarn and whatnot.
Yeah, I love that. The next category is movement. I mean, obviously, this is a good hobby because you're kind of like doing something fun, but also moving your body, which we love. And I think everyone can use a little bit more movement into their life. However, I think when it comes to like, oh, going to the gym is a hobby, because I definitely find myself saying this too. It's like, what do you like to do? And I'm like, oh, I work out every day. And it's like, yes, I like it. I don't hate it. I like the mental and physical benefits that come with going to the gym every day. But am I going to the gym strictly because I enjoy it? No. I'm going to the gym mainly because I like the mental and physical benefits after the fact. So I think that's again like the distinction between why are we doing this in the first place. However, there are still a lot of ways to make movement a hobby outside of just going to the gym. I feel like one good example of this is fun types of fitness classes like dancing classes. You could go to a Zumba class or a hip hop class, because maybe you're just curious in how to do hip hop if you've never done it before. I took a boxing class when I was in Nashville with some friends, and that was so fun. Some other ones, I feel like there's like martial arts classes and stuff. So there are different types of fitness classes that you can do more as a hobby. And yes, you're still moving your body and getting some of those mental and physical benefits, but you're doing it more for fun.
I'm going to use this as an opportunity to pitch everyone who's listening on juggling. Okay. Juggling. I think we should all be hot jugglers. I think we should. Can you imagine how cool that would be if everyone, we just started a juggling movement, and there's just
I
all
love
these
that for you. I'm not going to
beautiful
do
women
it.
out here juggling? Like, this would be so great, guys. I feel like it's something I just always was like, I want to say always curious about. It's not like I like dreamt of being a juggler when I was little, but I mean, like, I love trying new things, like doing random side quests and just doing things I've never done before, especially things that I think are challenging or just like so random. So I went to a couple drop in, like, they're not classes because you're not really getting taught one on one, but there's drop in juggling sessions in San Francisco when I was living there for a bit. And they had like professional jugglers who were like circus performers that travel the globe, who would be there to help like instruct you. And then when I moved to St. Pete, a circus arts school just opened, like, it was literally not even a month ago. And I went to it was their very first juggling class they ever offered. And it was just me and the instructor because they had just opened.
Wait, I love that.
Yes, it was just me and Sunshine, the juggling instructor, but it was so fun. And it was like 6 class pass credits or something. And I literally left. I can see them right now on my ottoman. I bought 3 juggling balls when I left so I can practice at home. It's like so challenging, like in a really good way. It doesn't take that long to get the hang of it, to be honest, but it's a mental challenge. And then you get to learn like new skills. So I can do like a cascade, which is just like the normal like juggling that you would see. But now I'm trying to learn columns, which is like when the ball goes like up and down in a straight line and one goes up and down in the middle. It's just fun and it's mentally challenging. It's not crazy hard on your body. So if you're like me and you don't enjoy high impact workouts or whatever, if you have pain and like working out is not necessarily ideal all the time, it's a good way. You're still going to break a sweat, but also look for like aerial arts classes or circus schools near you, because the one that's near me also has, it's called Lyra, I think, which is like the hoops that are like in the air. And then they also have hammocks. So like you can basically do like aerial arts, which you're moving your body and you're getting a workout in, but it's a bit more like still have to like use your body and like be strong and stuff, or like, you know, grow in strength, but it's more like you're, it's not like a hit workout, you know, it's a little more flowy and like, which is nice. They also have pole fitness, and I think those are ones where you don't even really feel like you're exercising because you're just having so much fun. But also yoga, Pilates, meditation, like those are all really great ways to move your body as well, and also a great way to like meet other people too.
Yeah, I think on the topic of classes in Nashville, my friends and I went to a couple line dancing classes, and I know that's a
Yes,
really big
so
hobby for
fun.
people. And it's not Nashville specific. Like I know you went to one down in Florida, like a
Hmm.
bunch of different cities have them. You might just have to look for them, but people get really into that. It is hard. And
It is
people
so
say like
hard.
you can't just go to a class and then know how to do it. Like these people will be watching YouTube videos, practicing at their house like every single day. Like that's how into it they are. I know you have a friend that's into the swing dancing, which is when you're basically line dancing with a partner. So that can be a hobby as well if you really like to dance and move your body in that way. But then also just sports. I follow this one creator that I guess she like danced growing up, and she posted this video where she was getting her photos done in her dance like leotard, like they do when
Mm.
you're younger. And she's like, me getting my annual like photos at my dance studio because your hobbies don't have to end when you graduate. And I just love that mindset so much of like, I played basketball and volleyball growing up, but then you graduate and you kind of don't do it anymore. I know in college I would play like intramural leagues because I was not good enough to be on my D1 college basketball team. But I would play like co-ed intramural basketball. And then when I graduated, I didn't do it for a couple of years. And I randomly like Googled adult basketball leagues and I found one, and I did it for a couple of seasons and it was so fun. And then I moved to Nashville, and I know I didn't do it in Nashville because I was like moving halfway through the season, but they have them down there too. So I know every single city has their own like adult sports league. In Pittsburgh, it's called Pittsburgh Sports League. But yeah, you can just join. Like some are one gender only, some are co-ed. So it depends on like the activity level that you want to do. I know in the co-ed leagues, they were like very, very competitive. Like I worked really hard in those leagues, but I've also heard that the girls ones they like don't take it as seriously. So like you could do that too.
Yeah. I'm like, also, how did I forget to mention pickleball?
Yeah,
Pickleball.
pickleball,
Pickleball is
tennis, golf.
so fun. And
Yeah,
also a lot of pickleball too, they do like there's a league here, but it's like a intramural, same thing, like co-ed league, and they'll separate you by level. So even if you're like a beginner and you really don't know how to play very well at all, you can still participate. And like, it's such a great way to meet people and move your body. They also have indoor leagues. Like, yeah, especially if you're in a city, I feel like there's probably so much to do that you don't even realize. There's a run club in Tampa. It's called Run Club for Mother Effers That Don't Run. That's what it's called, because they were like, we're sick of going to these run clubs where everyone's running a 7 minute mile when we're running like a 12-minute mile. So they started this run club. Granted, now runners show up to it, but there's a huge section of walkers. Like there might be something like that where you live that you don't even know about.
yeah, there's also ways to make exercise more of a hobby. Like, for example, let's say you really like yoga, but you're like, I don't really consider yoga my hobby because I do it for like the exercise benefit. I know a lot of cities will have like outdoor yoga events where it's more geared toward like socializing afterwards. In Nashville, it was called Sunday Morning Club. They would always have yoga at those. And like every Sunday morning, they would do like a big kind of like party in the park and you could do yoga and socialize and all of that. And cities have these options. So there are so many different ways to make movement more of your hobby and for enjoyment. But then the last one is your brain stimulating hobbies, and we wanted to include this because again it goes back to that curiosity piece that I feel like we've lost as adults, and we don't allow ourselves to just like be curious and try new things, try learning a new language that fits really well into this category and stimulate your brain in a way that doesn't benefit your work. When I was doing research for this episode, I found a quote that said that as an adult, we're trained to only be good at our work related tasks. So we start to feel like we're kind of terrible at everything else. And I know I've definitely felt like this. Like in school, you're taking so many different subjects, even through college. So you're really like hitting different points of your brain. But then you get into a job and you're only doing one thing. And a lot of other areas of your life end up lacking brain wise. So it is a good thing to implement into your stream of hobbies, to these kind of like brain stimulating activities. Like, for example, Sudoku puzzles. I was doing them the other day and I was like, why don't I do these more? This is so fun and it is so brain stimulating.
I've thought a lot about, okay, this is probably going to sound like kind of crazy, but I've thought a lot about and had certain moments in the last like year or so where I've realized I'm not as cognitively sharp as I feel like I once was.
Same.
I've also caught myself in the way that I talk, my mannerisms, and the things I think about being so social media centric. I don't know. And I started to pick up on it in conversations with other people. Like, I was out of like probably like a month ago, and it was just like in a conversation someone was just like out of nowhere was like clock it, and then I sat there and I was like, whoa, like our world is changing. There's nothing wrong obviously with saying clock it, but I was just sitting there being like, oh my gosh, like there are probably so many, I know there are so many little like social media Gen Z terms and things that I throw out and I say all the time, and I was realizing that I was losing some of my smarter, for lack of a better word, vocabulary. Like I was using simpler words, which we're taught to do on social media. They say that is, and in writing and like the ghostwriting work that I do and in social media, to speak and write at a fifth grade reading level, because the majority of Americans read at a fifth grade reading level. And so you want to make sure that your like content is able to be absorbed by the majority of people. But then also I realized I used to say a lot more, not that big words make you smarter, but I used to say a lot of bigger words, or I would just think differently. I don't know. I'm just realizing that some of the stuff is like giving me brain rot. And I have thought about how that then impacts the rest of our lives, and staying cognitively sharp now is so important, especially for then when you get older and you're like, that there's a reason why like they tell older people to do Sudoku puzzles and crossword puzzles and all these things. It's because they're trying to keep people cognitively sharp. And so I'm trying to make it a priority to do that, even like in the stuff I'm consuming, but also in my hobbies. Like I do puzzles, and it's funny because people would laugh, but then on my Instagram, I would always post my puzzles, and so many people would swipe up and DM me and be like, you put me onto puzzles, and now I'm loving it. It is just such a challenge for your brain. And I think that's so important. But also in the stuff I consume, I wouldn't necessarily consider this a hobby, but there's a newsletter called 1440. Media, I think is what it's called. It's like a daily newsletter with non-biased news. So it's like just middle of the political spectrum kind of news. And it just recaps like what is happening in the world, which is so good to stay informed. But I've also seen people making these videos. There's a couple creators that do it, and I always save their videos. And admittedly, I never come back to them, but I need to. It's like media I consumed this week that was like off social media, and it'll be an article on like something so niche, but it's like, wow, I should really think about that. Or it could be a YouTube video, but it's more of like a presentation, like a TED Talk style video, not this like continuous scroll. So I think it's helpful to find things that challenge your brain in different ways, because I don't know, I don't want to be brain rot. Like I don't want to start to lose my vocabulary and, you know, all the knowledge and critical thinking skills I have, because I'm just like scrolling through brain rot content every day.
Yeah, they actually say they call it like your mental endurance. Basically,
Mhm.
like how long throughout the day you can be like mentally turned on when it comes to like work and things you need to use your brain for, right?
Mhm.
And I've definitely noticed my mental endurance is getting significantly worse. Do you remember when you were in high school and you would be at school from like 7:30 to 3:30, and then maybe you had like a sports practice, but I also did like drama club and I was on the
Mhm.
debate team, and like I had a lot of things after school that I would also have to use my brain for, and it would be totally fine. I would think nothing of it, and then I would come home and I would do homework, right? And not
Mhm.
saying that that's the schedule that I want today. I don't want to be like
No.
thinking at 10 p.m. But now it's 2:30 and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I need to go lay on the couch for a second because like my brain just needs a break. Like my mental endurance is not as good." So I think that that's the benefit of picking up like one or two of these kind of like brain stimulating hobbies. To give you a couple of other really good examples. So I mentioned learning new languages, went through a phase, I think it was during COVID. I was trying a lot of different hobbies during COVID, but I was trying to learn French and it was so fun and it was so brain stimulating. Reading biographies or nonfiction about a topic that you're interested in or curious about. You mentioned puzzles, so like physical puzzles, crosswords, Sudoku. games. So like trivia is really good. You could do board game nights with friends or card games. My one friend in Nashville, she loves to play mahjong, so we would get together and play mahjong, and that is so brain stimulating. Like you really have to think to play that game, but it was so fun. Niche interests. So let's say you're interested in like coding or astronomy, human design, investing research. And then the last one can be social learning. So if you are in like a book club or there's debate groups or just like something to stimulate what you're curious about, but in a social setting.
Absolutely. Okay. And then the last thing we wanted to just cover is like, which we kind of talked a little bit about this, I think, but how to actually get started with a hobby. And I think this is a great place to go back to, like what I said at the beginning around, I used to feel so kind of guilty or be like, oh, like I don't want to invest money in, my hobbies. And I know people always joke about how expensive certain hobbies are, like running. They're like, you think, oh yeah, I'm going to become a runner. And then soon you're spending $150 on Hokas and you're buying the little gels
Or
and little
golf.
pouch and the yeah, golf. Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah,
Yeah,
golf
maybe don't.
definitely. Yeah, but I think also there are ways to, I mean, a couple things. One, if you feel like hobbies are something that is really important to you, which I think they should be, and I know like for me they are for multiple reasons, give yourself a line in your budget for them the same way you would anything else. Because if you really think about it, if your hobbies, if the purpose is, let's say you're stressed and you want something that's, for relaxation, or you want to stay cognitively sharp, those things, that's incredibly important. That's your nervous system, that's your brain health. That is incredibly important. So make it as important in your budget as you would anything else, right? So, and I think that's a good way to go about it. Okay, let me give myself a budget. I think one of my friends actually does this. She gives herself like a budget for just hobbies and stuff, and she'll use it to book a horseback riding class because she loves doing that, or, buying a pickleball paddle or whatever. But also, you can start hobbies on a smaller scale. For example, I mean, I was given a paddle, a pickleball paddle from somebody. And I mean, it was like a $10 paddle from Amazon. It was not good. Little like wrapping on the handle was literally falling off. He had taped it back on and then it fell off again. So I was like, okay, I need to get a better paddle. But I didn't buy a $60 paddle until I knew that I was going to be doing this a lot more. And even then I bought the $60 paddle. It was like over $100 and I got it on Facebook Marketplace brand new for $60. So like there are ways to start hobbies. Maybe you borrow someone's golf clubs or you just rent them the first couple times you go, or maybe if you are running, you run in the sneakers that you have already, or you get a book from the library when you want to start, seeing, oh, do I like to read, whatever. There are ways to start it on a smaller scale before you invest like hundreds and hundreds of dollars into it.
Facebook Marketplace is also such a good place for hobbies because a lot of people do test out hobbies and then decide that it's not for them. For example, if you really do want to get into like cooking and baking and you're like, oh, I need a KitchenAid, which like, no, you definitely don't to start cooking and baking. But everybody sells their KitchenAids on Facebook Marketplace
Really?
for like under $100 because it's one of those things that you think you're going to use all the time and then you get it and it just sits in your cabinet or on your shelf and then you end up selling it on Facebook Marketplace. So if you do want to get into like golf or tennis or pickleball or whatever it may be, you can probably find what you need on Facebook Marketplace.
100%. Or even like I've talked about it before, but with my puzzles, my friends and I, we started getting into puzzles. Well, I got into them, then everyone was like, oh, I need to try. So then they started getting into them and we started a little puzzle swap. So like the last two puzzles that I did are my friend Mallory's puzzles. And then one of my other friends has one of my puzzles. So we just have been swapping so that we're not spending a ton of money on puzzles all the time, but we still have them. And I know that when I told my mom I was getting into puzzles, bless her, she's so cute. She was like, so I found out in St. Pete they have a puzzle exchange. And she was like, it's like a giant group or something. And people will post in the group and be like, oh, I have a puzzle, like anyone want to swap? And then people will meet up and swap puzzles. It's like this huge thing. And I was like, wow, okay, like love that. But also I made a Lego set and I loved doing that. And I know people will also swap those. They'll build them, then they'll take them apart because sometimes you're like, okay, I just built a pirate ship. Do I really want to put this on display? No, I built a little cute bamboo plant. So it's been on display in my living room, but it is kind of throwing off
The aesthetic.
the aesthetic in here. We've got like this really cute Scandinavian look, and then we've got a Lego bamboo plant. It's really cute, but like you do them so fast, and then you're like, okay, what do I do? So it's like, yeah, take it apart. Or if you are baking, like even if you don't want a whole KitchenAid, like it could just be little accessories. Like, oh, I want to try making donuts or something. You buy the mold there, or even thrift stores. Like thrift stores will have certain things as well, but I think there are ways to test things in small ways before you really dive into it. Also, borrow things from friends. Like, let's say you're like, I really want to try making sourdough. Like, does anyone have the little pot or something? Or I know my friend has, she's been super into sourdough and she was giving away like sourdough starter. We were at her apartment to watch football because we're all in a fantasy league together. And she was handing out sourdough starter to anyone who wanted it because she had so much of it. And like, that's a great way to try. If you want to get into making sourdough, try it before you go buying everything for it, you know?
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good thing to remember. And then the last thing to remember is that the goal is not to master something, it's literally to enjoy the process and be curious about it. Like if you try to make a loaf of sourdough and it sucks and you don't want to eat it and you still end up eating the loaf from Whole Foods that week, like that is fine. It's literally about enjoying the process. And I feel like that's something that we kind of forget as we get older. It's like it is about the process. Like, let's say you're cooking a new recipe and you're annoyed that it takes you an hour and 20 minutes. Like, the goal is to enjoy that hour and 20 minutes. If anything, it's probably better that it takes an hour and 20 instead of 40 minutes because then you're enjoying it longer. So it's like, just remember that and keep that in mind because I think we end up kind of either resenting what we're doing or we lose interest in it quick because we're not going into it with the right intention. I know I really enjoyed this episode and it's made me like really inspired to go spend my weekend like figuring out some hobbies. So if you like this episode too, please let us know in Spotify. And if there's any other episodes that you want to hear us cover in the near future, leave those in Spotify as well. Because like we said, this episode came from one of your recommendations in Spotify. So we really, really appreciate that. But with that, thanks for tuning in to the Life You Love podcast. And until next week.